This is a pickup wound TriFilar. This pickup is Quadfilar, where filar is just a strand of copper, from mono to bi to tri, and so on. This little MultiFi got carried away. I tried searching for a single instance of multifilar pickups, but everything from Rickenbacker's frying pan to Paul Reed Smith narrowfields is monofilar. Every pickup on the market is mono, including pickups with coil taps, because that extra tap wrapped is still wound from a single spool of copper. Besides the added complexity, why are there no multifilar pickups? Is there a reason? As a hand winder, I am machine. Trying to wind multifilar has been a part of my evolving process to save time, because time is a turtle if you hand wind. 807, 808, boom, ching, boom, boom. A couple years ago, these very bright Firebirds took me a full weekend to wind trad mono. If I use multiple spools at once, I could cut production time by half, or more than half the time it takes to wind with a single strand by hand. Here you see my copper spool houses. Hand winding without any drag on the wire is a drag, and the first multifilar coils I wound were curly and got kinky quickly. To help prevent that, I housed the spools in a makeshift funnel made of tape-op covers for quality tone transference, shrink-wrap tubes for the chimney chutes, and a shrink tube as a guiding eyelet. This is an insufficient rig for adding drag and tension, but it did help a little to keep wires from getting tangled. Now to wind a QuadFi pickup. Using all the spools I have, 3 42-gauge spools, heavy form var, plain enamel, and poly, and 1 43-gauge plain enamel. Trying to hand tension with a single strand is one kind of futile. This is very, very.
Wait, what? Did I break it?
Okay, try again. Wind, wind, wind.
100.
And I wind.
This is a problem. I'm gonna have to tape it though.
After freeing a snag, I captain taped the slack. We're back in the groove. Thus far, multifilar is for bird's nests and increasing the odds of snags.
No!
1 snap strand and 3 in hand. I was too far in to just start over. This fine soldering job was for naught, because I couldn't get a read on the multimeter. It was probably dead within the coil. But what's a few failed hours? Try again.
No!
A couple hours into this before I broke a strand. Not sure why I severed all strands besides I like pain, but got a reading on all 4 conductors and continued. The captain insulation makes for a slippery surface to wind over, but we're doing it well. With the bobbin bloated with copper, it's time for some body tape. I need junctions to hook up each conductor. Each of the 4 strands are roughly 2,600 turns, and once they're wired up in series, the full coil is around 10,400 turns total. I intentionally overwound this pickup because, with 4 strands, think of all the ways this could hook up. If strand 1 fed strand 2, and 2 went into 3, that's 7,800 turns in series for a decent coil tap. Then the 4th strand could be the series option for the full coil. Every junction could get its own insert. Or look here, every strand could get its own dedicated resistor-capacitor combo before feeding the next strand. You get an RC! You get an RC! Multifilar is the next big pickup platform! What should these be called? Multi-coils? They're not single coils, but they can fit in a single coil footprint. What about the option of wiring strands out of phase? If our main coil is 3 strands in series, maybe the remaining 4th strand routes to a pot that can blend in parallel with the hot lead out. If I did something like that, I could send a strand to its own sweepable volume or tone pot. But as I thought about that, what's a tone pot usually doing? It's just a low-pass, high-freq roll-off. Ostensibly, if that fourth strand hooked up in reverse to its home pot, where its hot went to ground and its cold went to the pot with a cap, if that strand was wired in parallel and out of phase with the main pup's output, then you could target and cut low frequencies out of the main signal. Think about typical resistor values in a guitar, 500K, 250K, working in tandem with a capacitor, and depending on the pickup and signal connected to it, the tone pot changes where the highs roll off, with 500K or 1 meg preserving more highs. Now flip it and reverse it. That'd be like 1 meg and 500K preserving more lows. So a value like 250K or lower would cut out more lows and start creeping up into the low mids. Put the coil down, flip it, and reverse it. It'd be like the pickup has a built-in high-pass filter with the hopes it doesn't load the highs too much. Even if this filter doesn't cut out hashy high RF interference, if it works, it could address some of the 60-cycle hum and clean out the low rumble. Instead of an external pot hookup, why not try hardwiring this into the base of the bobbin? I have some 100K resistors I was saving for a few pedal builds. I wish I had a more compact Wyma-style cap, but I'll use this bulky 22 nanofarads orange drop. Brainstorming how to plot this, it hurts to look at this. I chose the 43 gauge strand to be the reverse phase because it's the thinnest of the four, hoping it'd help with the coupling of the 42 gauges. Let's see how this tests. 5.25K, and for inductance, the multimeter says this pup is wonky. Negative 0.13. I had another look at my tidy connections. I suspect I made this blob a node that joined the main coil with the reverse strand. So instead of the fourth strand behaving like a dummy coil with its own separate path to ground, I was the dummy, mixing both the start of the main coil and the finish of the reverse coil. And is it time for an ibuprofen? Are we thinking outside of the coil yet?
That's our saving grace.
To fix the RC hookup, I cut the cap from the node, and when I went to remeasure, the meter told me the true story of inductance from tensionless hand winding. 0.825 henries for the 3 strands in series without the fourth. Okay, that's what we're working with to reconnect the fourth strand to the RC. That tiny sliver of 43 gauge right there. Now I'm using a screw as a common reference point for both the reverse 43 gauge strand as well as the ground side of the capacitor in parallel. And I'll give the screw its own path to ground. This is how I should have wired it. Let's remeasure. Still negative inductance. Go! I reconnected the cap back to the node again. Snippety snip. Now we're reading at, 1 Henry. Come on. Here we go, giddy up. World's first coil that eats itself out. A cannibal for its own low end. Well, for all the weeks I spent on this and trying to make this work, I cannot say I love the sound of this. I want to love it, but I don't. It is quieter, but the hum isn't eliminated. I'd welcome the hum back if it would lift this weighted tone blanket. It's like a thin wool, but weird, because there are high frequencies present. It's just kind of like sneezing into a hanky. If the coil has a cutlass, it's hacking my resonance down to a molehill. Wooly, 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 wooly. Watch me now switch over to this neck I wound TriFi after this QuadFi disappointment. The TriFi pup is instantly clearer, like shearing off a layer of the wool. Hard to say how much inductive effect this had, but this TriFi pup has steel in its guts. Little steel slivers I inserted about 2/3 into the wind. And I almost like this. I mean, I do like it, but something still feels off. My first guess was that 250K pots and a 22 nanofarad cap was too much of a load. Maybe 300K and 15 nanofarads would lift the blanket. I also wanted to know, will the QuadFi pup sound better if all strands are hooked up in series? Still a low reading. How much inductance can be boosted post-wind? For the HumCutter Series QuadFi, I made stacks of thin steel laminations to place under the base. I did the same on the TriFi, but also added an additional lamination at one side of the coil. I'm familiar with seeing tellies and strats with metal added to the bobbin's base plate to concentrate flux there for an inductive boost. But what I found as I fiddled around was, if I moved my lamination so that its length bisected the middle of the rods, it translated to the highest inductance reading, a little higher than covering the rods completely. That's something to try again in the future. Rather than one big metal base plate, maybe split the plate into 2 halves, leaving a small gap so the flux has an unobstructed return path to the magnets. Also worth noting that this steel isn't grounded. Hopefully the thin laminations are less of an antenna than a thicker traditional metal base. Here's the HumCutter without its cutlass. A cut-less QuadFi. Cut, less, cut, less. The QuadFi series is a little louder than before, with even more of that woolly built-in cat bully soaking up the signal. This pup is congested, backed up. Release my signal. Listen to the palm and finger noise. Palms, fingers, squeeze the rose, squeeze the rose. It sounds like excess capacitance, because you can feel a bump in the low mids. It feels thick, but also is there a hyped presence? Not harsh, just seems to exaggerate the finger noise. The resonant peaks of both pups are either way up on the spectrum or just low in amplitude. Both of the pups have to be lower impedance signals than a trad mono pickup, because look, the TriFi TONEPUPS interaction is super subtle until I get down to 4, 5. Even when I was using the 22 nanofarads cap, about 4 to 5 was around the spot I could start to hear the interaction. And then the TONEPUPS with the QuadFi, the interaction is pretty non-existent. Like there's no resonant peak to sweep. It's been a month now of playing with these two pickups and trying to figure out what exactly did I make. And in the questioning, I've gone from disappointed parent to having a little less disdain for both creations. I just have to accept them for what they are. Some kind of lower impedance pickups with a physically average voice, dependent on the amp and EQ cranked up. It's like I have to give them a resonant hand, crank the upper mid band. Here's QuadFi flat and QuadFi cranked, TriFi flat, TriFi with a little boost. So these pups schooled me some lessons on inductance, capacitance, and impedance. As for inductance, inductance loves tension. Because of my freehand winding, my coils took an L on output. No matter how hard my hand turned a corner, it's like the tension was reset on the length. Then with every filar I added beyond a single strand, the inductance seemed to go down. Not to overlook that the QuadFi had a captain belly and TriFi had steel in its guts. But remember, the 10,400 turn QuadFi pup measured some 0.970 Henry, while the lower wound 9,600 turn TriFi pup measured a tad over 1 Henry. A bigger lesson is that how the coil goes down might be more important than the total turn counts, especially with the bother of laying multiple copper strands down in parallel for round trips from start to finish, as I did with these two pups. 1, 2, 3, 4. Can I have a little less damp on my signal? The capacitance seemed to average the frequency response, making for pickups that were actually kind of smooth, not harsh. And lastly, with every added filar, the impedance dropped. The resonant peak was either way up off the spectrum, a gentle null, or both. I don't know. I don't have Paul Reed Smith's oscilloscope, but it felt like that. It's like the impedance dropped and the resonant peak collapsed with it. Multifilar, when only average will do. And with QuadFi being both lower impedance and darker, when combined with the brighter neck, the QuadFi's blanket of tone was the dominant voice. That's something to keep in mind when pairing pickups in a set. The power of the dark side will win out. I don't want to smear on QuadFi too much, because until I wind a QuadFi coil with sustained tension and without being pregnant with captain inserts, it's hard to know what effect the tone control would have on a tensioned coil with 10,000 turns. But that is an idea to try. A partial QuadFi layer that's inserted somewhere at the midpoint of a coil that already has a resonant peak humming high. Or maybe wind a coil mono or BiFi up to a halfway point, or up to a third or 2/3, then wind a smaller QuadFi layer to drop impedance down, then finish the coil with a high impedance mono layer stacked above it to top it off. That is certainly nuking and overdoing everything pickups. But the QuadFi layer and the TriFi layer 2, and the TriFi layer 2, they could both be a method in smoothing out a spiky pickup, like a built-in coil conditioner, a deharsher, coils with mini circuits embedded within, taking coils beyond the taps. Here's my final takeaway. Simplify, simplify. Get back to more mono and more BiFi than other multi, which leads me to my next experiments. Layer Pup Cakes. Even though my MultiFi examples have lower inductance, they do sustain and they do have body. If they're intentionally layered, where I give the bigger turn ratios to mono and BiFi, BiFi being the sponge cake and mono the main filling, then TriFi can be the thick, soothe butter. La crème de QuadFi. Oh, mono! You put the glaze on top! Check back in for some delicious layer Pup Cakes.